So to start our meetup, we have the pleasure to hear from several presenters who are involved in a powerful digital storytelling project involving high school students from Southeast Ohio. And this is part of a POV grant that was awarded to WOUB. We're going to get to hear about the project through the eyes of the producers and also from the perspective of a technology education teacher who is participating in the project. I don't want to steal their thunder, so I'm going to pass things off to Sherry Russo, who is WOUB's Community Engagement Manager, and Debbie Brewer, who is WOUB's Educational Services Manager, to get things started. So Sherry and Debbie, take it away.
Thank you, Leslie. We appreciate it. As Leslie said, my name is Sherry Russo. I'm the Community Engagement Manager at WOUB Public Media. Today, we're going to talk about digital storytelling in the classroom, and WOUB has recently embarked on a project with PBS's POV, which is an independent documentary film program, to utilize one of their educational films as a springboard to promote the use of personal digital storytelling by high school students. The film we used was called Portraits and Dreams, and it tells the story of a teacher in the 1970s in Appalachian, Kentucky, who taught students how to accurately represent their life and culture through photography. And viewing this powerful film and then having a panel discussion with prominent community leaders in their communities gave the students that we're working with at 4 area high schools the inspiration to own and tell their own personal story through media and take control of shaping the narrative about the Appalachian region of Ohio. So now I will turn things over to Debbie Brewer, WOUB's Educational Services Manager.
Thanks, Sherry. I just wanted to say a little bit about this specific teacher professional development, because this was a part of the grant. And so when we talked about what is the best way for us to share this information with Ohio, we thought, of course, hearing from our producers that were part of the project, but then also bringing in Ohio teachers who are doing other types of digital storytelling or who have done these projects to share their experience, their impact on their students and on themselves. And then again, just that piece of how do you do this? What are some of those specifics of what can you do and how can you do in your classroom? So that's sort of the idea behind this meetup. I think this meetup is a powerful tool because it's a chance for teachers to talk to other teachers. So I just want to emphasize again what Leslie said about the chat. If you're doing something in your classroom that is, that's a great idea, we all want to hear that. So please put that in there. We all really want to, and you can put your email or contact information. So if another person thinks that's a great idea, they could contact you. So so this could be a professional development for all of us. So I'm going to go ahead and start it with our producers that worked on the project. Robert Sawyer is the producer for Portraits and Dreams and the outreach specialist for POV. And he's going to be working with Evan Shaw, who's a WOUB's public media producer director. And then they're going to talk also with Matt Stone, who is also one of our teachers that worked in the project. So with that, I'm going to get off and we're going to hear from these guys.
Thank you so much, Deb. That was a great introduction, and really great to be here. Thank you to WOUB for this opportunity, and I just wanted to say hello, Ohio. As Sherry said, my name is Robert Sawyer. I'm one of the producers of Portraits and Dreams, and I'm also the outreach specialist at POV Films, working on community engagement with all of the documentaries at POV. A little background about me. So I grew up in the Appalachian Mountains of Virginia, in the Blue Ridge Mountains specifically. And I first came across the book Portraits and Dreams when I started working at Appalshop, which is short for Appalachian Film Workshop, and it's based in Whitesburg, Kentucky. Appalshop, APPALSHOP, began in 1969 as a project of the War on Poverty. And its goal was to train youth in the Appalachian Mountains in the skills of filmmaking. And the idea was that then those youth would take those skills and find employment elsewhere. And really what happened is that those original students decided to stay, and they founded a media arts organization in the heart of Appalachia. And so I'd always wanted to be a filmmaker, and until I came to Appalshop, I didn't know and I didn't realize that I could stay in the region where I'm from, and not only learn how to make films, but make films there in the place where I am from. So Appalshop provided me that opportunity, and I was really lucky. I was mentored by a few of the founding members of Appalshop, and that first year I was there, I came across the book Portraits and Dreams, which is the subject of this film, and I was immediately struck by it. It didn't look like any photography book that I've never seen before. The photographs the students made at the time, I mean, they were really breathtaking and difficult to describe, really. It was a look at life in the mountains that you can only get from a child's perspective, really. So I continued to learn filmmaking. I began making my own films, looking at cultural traditions in Appalachia, films about music, about food, the history of the region, coal mining, the lives of mountain people. And then early on, I began to teach youth media to students in Eastern Kentucky, Virginia, West Virginia. And then that eventually led to youth exchanges with students throughout the country, places like the Mississippi Delta, and also even Indonesia. We did a youth exchange there. But throughout those years, the Portraits and Dreams book, it really stuck with me, and I just kept returning to it. So around 10 years ago, I set out with Wendy Ewald and Elizabeth Barrett to make a film about the book, about the photography class, and about how the book came to be. So we began by finding as many former students as we could, really to understand what had happened to the film for those years since the class happened. And what was really wonderful was that we didn't have to try very hard to show how transformative the experience was. I mean, many decades after that class, the memories of the time were very fresh, and the students, now adults, that we interviewed time and time again, they just kept saying over and over that the class really allowed them to see themselves for who they were and to see the place where they were from. And one thing that's important to remember is that when this photography class happened in the 1970s, there was no such thing as digital storytelling. I mean, that it didn't exist. Storytelling was very analog, and when these students took photographs, they spent a lot of time in the dark room and were very involved in how the photographs came to be. And so the relationship between the photographer and the image was really different than it is today. And that was an important discovery for the film and for understanding how to make the film. And also for me as a youth media educator, because I think what I've always tried to emphasize the most was students to understand how images are made and how films come together so that they can interpret and understand the images that were being made from them about where they were from. And so in making the film Portraits and Dreams, I mean, what was really reinforced for me was that media literacy has a profound impact on self-image, and that self-image has an impact on how successful we can be as citizens in a society. And a deep understanding of how stories are told can help us become better human beings. I truly believe that. And so that was reinforced by the film for sure. And as a producer of the film, it was important for the film to reach a wide audience. I wanted that to happen and for there to be a broadcast, but primarily I was more excited about how the film could be used in a classroom setting. And so what's really special has been partnering with WOUB and with POV, because really at its heart, Portraits and Dreams is a film about teachers and students and the relationships between teachers and students and what is possible and what is the impact when we have arts education in our schools. So, you know, through the Our America Project, we hooked up with WOUB and partnered with WOUB to further the impact of this film. And it was really great to find such a great staff at WOUB who wanted to not only use the film in the classrooms, also explore the notion of self-expression, the power of arts education, and they could really reach out directly to teachers and students throughout Southeastern Ohio and now the state. So, it's been an incredible project, and one of the reasons why is my colleague, Evan Shaw, who has been part of leading this effort and has done an incredible job working with students. And I cannot wait to hear what he has to tell you.
Me either. So let's give it a try. As Robert said, thank you, Robert. My name's Evan Shaw, and I'm a producer here at WOUB. And a little quick background about myself. I grew up here in Southeastern Ohio. I graduated from Meigs High School in Meigs County, and then went to Ohio University, where I studied filmmaking at WOUB as a student. In my current role at WOUB, I produce historical documentaries and cultural documentaries about the histories and people of Southeastern Ohio. We're a region that is often overlooked when it comes to storytelling in general, especially in digital media and film and things like that. And so every year we choose a city and do a film about its history and the people and what makes it special. And over the past, we're going on our 8th year of this series, and it's called Our Town. I've started to realize how much pride there is in this area, but also how misunderstood it can be at times, because there's simply not enough storytelling being done in our region about who we really are. People have a perception sometimes of what Southeastern Ohio is like and what the people down here are like. And so when this opportunity came up to work with Portraits and Dreams and POV to create this project, it was an incredibly exciting opportunity for us. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the nitty-gritty of the project that we're working on. What we did, Sherry touched on it earlier too, we chose 4 high schools here in Southeastern Ohio. We chose rural high schools because that's pretty much what we have to work with, and places that don't always get a lot of outside collaboration on projects. And we chose a class within each one of those 4 high schools. We work with teachers in them, and each student or group of 2 to 3 students, their task for this project is to create a documentary film about what life is like for them as a 17-year-old growing up in Southeastern Ohio in 2020 and 2021. And that was pretty much the only parameters that I put on it, because frankly, it's been a couple years since I was a 17-year-old in Southeastern Ohio, and I don't know what it's like, to be that age anymore. But it's important for these kids and these students to have that opportunity. So what we do is, starting middle of the fall, we have tried to meet bi-weekly, every 2-3 weeks. In case you're unaware, there's a global pandemic, so schedules are kind of crazy right now. But we've met with each class as many times as possible, and have started a conversation, first of all, about who they think they are. What is important to these students? What do they think about their hometowns, their home, where they live? And also, what do they want to tell the rest of the state, the country, or themselves about who they are? And that is then transferring into now, where they are starting production on the films themselves. But it was very important to us, and especially me, we met probably 3 or 4 times with each school and just had a conversation and got the ball rolling. First of all, we watched Robert's film, Portraits and Dreams, to kind of get the conversation started there. And then we had in-depth discussions over Zoom about what the kids thought about who they were. We touched on a lot of things media literacy wise, as far as what do they think that the outside world thinks of them. And this is something, especially in Appalachian, Ohio, that we may not think about how we're perceived in the national media. Lori, do you mind pulling up that slide real quick for me? There's one thing I want to show you real quick. This is an example of what outside media looks like, what a lot of people on the outside see when they think of Appalachia or they think of rural areas. This is a show, next one. Yep, there it is. This is a show right now on the Disney Channel called Big City Greens. And it is a cartoon. I walked in a couple months ago and my 3-year-old was watching this. It just came on after Puppy Dog Pals. And it's the story of a poor rural family that moves to the big city and they just can't quite figure out how to navigate the asphalt jungle. And look at their house. They live in a rundown shack. There are cows in the yard. There are chickens everywhere. There's one more, Lori, if you could jump to that one. Young man chasing chickens in his front yard in the middle of all these skyscrapers. You can bring it back to me. That show's called Big City Greens, and that's on the Disney Channel right now. You can go turn it on and find it. And that's not okay, because the kids that we're working with, that's what they see. And from a very young age, if you are my 3-year-old, if that's the message that he is getting about who he is at that age, how does that impact him as he grows up? How does that impact his sense of his worth, of his people's worth, of his, where he comes from? And so this project has been focused on giving the students in these classes an opportunity to really dive into that and to talk about things that are important to them. And things that people wouldn't think about. Some subjects that students have chosen to make their films about have been, one student is doing a film on how his life changed when broadband internet came to town. He wants to go and study computer science in college. And that was probably not going to be a possibility, let's be honest, without broadband in his high school years. He got it and his life completely changed. Other students are doing things, two boys are working together on a project about how their lives are different because one lives in town and one lives 10 minutes out of town, but they're still best friends, and how their lives are different, even though they're growing up in the same area. So that is kind of an overview of what the students are working on and what the project is like. And one thing that I think has been fascinating is, for the past 8 years, I've lived and breathed Southeastern Ohio culture. Everyone refers to us as Appalachian Ohio. I use the word Appalachian all the time, but I've learned so much of what these students, how they see themselves. One of the questions I've asked in every class is, do you identify with the word Appalachian? Do you consider yourself Appalachian? And out of close to 100 students, not one has raised their hand. And that's just an interesting thing I've noticed about how to reach these students, how they can, how we can understand them a little bit better. We are working on documentaries because that's my background, that's Robert's background, but this kind of storytelling project can be done really in any kind of medium. You could do this same kind of project in writing exercises. If you're an English teacher, you could do it in history classes, learning about your local history, which is unfortunately left out so often in Ohio's curriculums, because there's so much other stuff to get in there. Working on with history, you could do it with photography, you could do it with art, you could do it with video, but on more modern platforms such as TikTok. And I know that that's kind of a scary thing for a lot of people, but it's important to find out how these students are telling stories amongst themselves and then giving them the guidelines and the guidance on who they are, letting them think about those kinds of things. And so really, I think it's important to note that when this is all done, are these students going to come out of here and become the next Steven Spielberg? I don't know. I hope so. That'd be great. Odds are they probably won't. And I'm not really concerned, frankly, about what their final project, if it's the most beautifully shot film you've ever seen. I want these students to take 3 or 4 months, and we're giving this a long period of time. This is not a 2-week project. This is a project that has stretched from October and it'll go on into March. I want them to have that time to really think about who they are and to think about the narrative that is out there about the people in their region and what they want to change that to, and what they want to tell the rest of the country as well. So that's a little bit about the project. I'm going to pass it over to Matt Stone, who is one of our teachers at Logan High School. He actually has 2 classes that are doing this. Matt is a video teacher and does a fantastic job at Logan. Logan has an incredible video department, and he's been great to work with so far. So Matt?
Thanks. Like my classes really concentrate on live event video production, like sporting events and theater productions, and we do a weekly TV show. And so when I first was offered this project, they talked to us about this project, I got excited because it's, something we don't do. We don't do documentary filmmaking, especially on like a personal level like this. It's such a personal thing. And lots of times, even in what I think is a fun class, video production, trying to get kids to come up with topics, get things for them to make stories about, to make segments about for the show and things. It's like pulling teeth because they're teenagers, and it's like I don't want to tell them what to do. I want them, something they're passionate about, to come up with an idea. And with this project, we have all the equipment here already, but we don't do documentaries usually. So it's kind of nice that I was able to present this to the students with Evan and Sherry. They were helping us come up with some things, and the kids really, they just went for it. The kids that volunteered for the project out of my 2 classes, I didn't have to pull teeth. They were into it. They were coming up with ideas, working with each other, and it's just kind of nice to see that happen. It's how it's like the dream, really, getting them to be interested and excited about something. It's really nice to see them working together. And I think, we've with the COVID thing, it's been a nightmare trying to get this all organized, but I think we're heading in the right direction. We've got some really good topics, some really good direction. I think we're heading the right place. And it's going to be, I think when these are finished, I'm going to be really excited about the finished product for everybody to see, because they are telling personal stories about what it's like to be from here. We had those panel discussions. They really were into asking really good questions. I think they got a lot out of that too. So I'm excited about what it's going to be like to see the final product, and I'm really excited about this whole project. So, yep.
Yeah, and Matt mentioned the panel discussions, and that's one other thing that I forgot to bring up. You know, earlier in this process, what we did is we had Robert join us, as well as community members from the local communities that all these schools are located in. And the students chose the community leaders. We had, you know, bank presidents. We had people that work with nonprofits, things like that. And the community leaders talk to the students about what they love about their hometown, what they appreciate about it. And so that was another way for us to build those communities. Even, you know, we're small towns, but we still need those relationships to be built. And, you know, Matt, his students have some incredible ideas that they're coming up with, and they're tackling some tough problems, which is incredible. So I'm really excited to see that. One thing in the chat, Sarah, I noticed you asked about using this with urban youth, whether we have done that. We have not, because frankly, there aren't many urban areas in southeastern Ohio. But again, this is a project that could be done with any group of students. This is not specific to Appalachian rural people. It is everyone faces these problems. So this type of storytelling workshop could easily be done with the urban youth, suburban, rural, pretty much anybody. It's important for everyone to know who they are and where they come from, and what challenges and also positives come out of that as well.
And I'll say that in the past, I've conducted many rural urban youth exchanges, and they've been really successful. And I think this notion of identity and self-image is something that students share no matter where they live. And it's an important media literacy at the moment is a very important issue about understanding, you know, how images are made, how films are made, so that you can be critical and that you can ask questions about what's being presented to you as quote unquote your story. And so there are many examples of this working in all types of settings. And so it's exciting, and we'd love to talk to you more later.
Yeah, and then just to add one more thing on Robert, then I'll be quiet because I don't want to run over my time. But you know, he mentioned youth exchange, media exchange. You know, the opportunities for this program are really endless. How incredible would it be for you know, two groups of people to take students from rural southeastern Ohio and a group of students from urban Cincinnati and have them make projects together, and find problems that they both deal with. You know, and I bet that the problems may be a lot more similar than we might think on the surface, and that also gets people talking. It gets people understanding different cultures, different backgrounds, as well as understanding yourself. So the idea of exchange between these programs is also something that's very fascinating to me. And really my hope is that anyone who's listening to this and watching will take what we're doing and do it completely different, but however it works for the people that you serve and the students you serve. And I think that's all. Next is, I forgot who to pass it to.
Oh, I'll do it. Don't worry. You
Okay,
don't-
sorry.
Because first I want to thank you all for sharing this information about such an inspiring and empowering project. And I love the way the conversation's going, where new ideas are flying out as you're talking about your current project. So thank you so much. That was great. Next, I have the pleasure to introduce Angie Hall. And Angie is a social studies teacher at Athens Middle School. And we're going to get to hear from Angie about her experiences working on documentary projects with her students, and also her, I feel, very thoughtful and insightful observations of the impact this work has had on her students. So Angie, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Okay, it's hard to think about what I want to say because I'm still processing how I can implement what they said in my classroom. But I'm here because I've always used documentary excerpts, just clips from them in my classroom to supplement my instruction. It's good for the kids, the students, to have critical voices, to have visual tools, differing perspectives. It kind of creates a complete narrative. But then I attended a professional development opportunity at WOUB with Debbie Brewer and Evan Shaw, for the teachers of my district, grades 7 through 12, and left there incredibly inspired. I was on the phone with Evan saying, help, what can we do to take this into my classroom? So for the last 2 years, not this year, Evan has helped me help students make documentaries, and they chose the topics. It's a select group of students right now. I'd like to bring it into my entire classroom. But I'm going to just share with you some of what the students said or what conversations I've had with them, because I think that better than anything illustrates how neat it is to have kids make documentaries or use digital storytelling. Fun and engaging. It's just, you hear that over and over and over again. They're self-motivated. They can compare it to writing an essay or creating a one-pager, and they never want to do those kind of projects again. They want to express themselves this way. The actual tools that they use, they have to find the visuals. So they're actually working with primary sources, not reading them about them in a book or having a Xerox copy of that. They are going to Ohio University Archives or our local history center and meeting with people who help them touch and process actual primary sources to help tell their stories. It enhances their creative writing. You have to write in a way that tells a story very clearly, very, very clearly. They have to find the visuals that tell their story as they're narrating. That's a really interesting process to watch with the students. And as they narrate their videos, they have to speak properly. They have to learn to slow down, to speak clearly, to avoid the likes, the ums that are typical speech patterns with some of our youth people, even nervous adults. So it's interesting to watch them take history that they're interested in and tell the story incredibly thoroughly, finding visuals and music and interviews to support the narrative that they're writing as they research. Their research skills are better than any students I've ever taught. It's interesting from that, I'm talking to, so some other really quick ones. Social skills, these people have to email adults in a way that makes an adult want to respond to be a part of an interview. They have to set appointments. They have to interview intelligently, dressed appropriately. They learn tech skills, photography, video making, recording, adding music. The best part of this, I think, of all of it is how they impact others. To have adults say to them, I didn't know that. I learned something from you. One group this past year presented at National History Day competition, and one of the judges was a Vietnam veteran. Their project was about the Vietnam Wall, and the man teared. He cried and had just a response to it that touched everybody in the room. That's really cool that a group of 8th grade students were able to do that and to create such a special story. So I could go on, I guess, forever, but I think that really helps tell you that these are important projects for students, and what they get out of them is more than that ever get out of a regular normal classroom experience.
Thank you, Angie. I know you had more to say, and and maybe if we have time in the open forum, if it fits in, you can share more of your insights. But thank you so much for these great insights and sharing your observations. And I also want to say that I mentioned how there are slides. So when you go to the link for the slides that we're going to put in the chat, you'll see that there are also slides for what Angie was talking about, and Matt, and Evan and Robert, and there are links there. So you can go and explore some examples and resources and information on those slides after the meetup. Well, now I want to take a moment for Lori Pringle to touch upon the many connections that can exist between digital storytelling projects and Ohio's learning standards. And Lori wears many hats. She's a library media specialist at Highland High School and an educational engagement consultant at WOUB. And we're going to be hearing even more from Lori later.
Okay, thank you, Leslie.
Sure.
This is the presentation that you will be getting a link to. And this next section, we're going to talk a little bit about the standards because that was a key component of this meetup. Digital storytelling, we feel, is a great way to address countless Ohio learning standards. And as Leslie mentioned earlier, we did work with specialists from the Ohio Department of Education to help curate standards that we feel would be the best to design your storytelling units. So I'm going to go through a few slides here, just kind of helping you to see what we put together for you. This first slide is the English language arts, and you'll notice at the top there's a green link, and that will take you out to the ODE website where you can get the full English language arts standards. And then we've kind of highlighted some of the key standards we feel really would fit well with a digital storytelling project. Here is a focus on the high school social studies. And we do want to note down at the bottom, there's a link to Appendix A. That is a great resource for you to look at the Ohio Learning Standards for English Language Arts and Literacy in History and Social Studies. And this same appendix also addresses the science and technology subjects, so that integration between content areas. We did the same for middle school social studies. So here you have those key focus areas. And we're excited to include the visual art standards that are in draft form as of 2021. So we're kind of moving forward and anticipating those new standards. So there you have your visual art standards that might fit with a digital storytelling project. And the next slide is your media art standards. And then don't forget about our Ohio Learning Standards for Technology that could be designed into units, and those really fit many instructors. And then the following slide is our new Ohio Library Guidelines for Learners that were just formally published here in this recently, as well as the 2021 Ohio Library Guidelines for Learners that were also just recently released, and they align perfectly to digital storytelling projects and collaboration in the classroom. We've also aligned standards to career tech education, including arts and communication and information technology. Those links will take you out to those documents as well. And let's go ahead and pass it back to Leslie.
You're muted, Leslie.
Sorry about that. I thought I went off mute. Okay, again, Lori, thank you. And from that, you can see all the kinds of connections and all the different ways teachers can connect digital storytelling to their curriculums. So last but not least, we now get the opportunity to hear from a team of educators from Highland High School. And they're going to share with us some great examples of how they've been implementing digital storytelling in ELA, social studies, and visual arts high school classrooms. And they're also going to provide some useful information about tools and production techniques that can apply across content areas. We also have a chance to hear about the process they use to be able to work together as an interdisciplinary team at the high school level. So back to you, Lori.
Thank you.
Sure.
I'm excited to introduce a team of teachers from Holmes County that have worked with me to implement projects at the high school. Our first presenter you're going to hear from is Chris Franks, and he instructs students in visual arts and video production, as well as then he'll pass it on to Chad Hostetler, who teaches world and American history students at Highland. And then Carrie Jones, who also teaches with us, is one of our English language arts teachers that instructs sophomores and seniors. And it's been a pleasure to collaborate across the content areas with these fine teachers and work with them as individuals. And I'm very grateful for them to share their expertise with us today. A bit about working as an interdisciplinary team, because projects like digital storytelling work perfectly for that kind of collaboration across content areas. Just to get a little feel for what that looked like for us. We started conversations really stemming off of our graduates who shared with us how when they went off to college, they really realized they needed more experience with research projects. And yet we all had the common theme of we hated and dreaded assigning and grading research projects. So we thought, well, there's a place where maybe we could work collaboratively. So we discussed some key content standards and what we wanted to focus on. We decided to start with an argumentative research paper focus with history topics from American history that the students selected and were approved by the history teacher. And that has actually opened up additional projects, and we're exploring, doing some generational studies and different projects that might incorporate the video production as well. So thinking about that way we broke down an interdisciplinary project then, what we found worked well was in history class, the students selected their topic. They had time to research, and they did the general outline of their content. And at the same time, working through that process, they were working with their English teachers to formalize a good, strong thesis statement. They worked on putting that outline into proper outline format. In English class, they focused on their rough draft, and they did their peer reviews. And then the English department graded that rough draft from an English standpoint. That was then turned in as a final project to the history teacher. And the English department also helped with formatting their title page and their works cited. As the librarian, I was involved throughout the project development. I helped out with research inquiry and establishing research tools and resources for the students, as well as helping educate on plagiarism, citation, and following up with some LMLA style as well. And you could use any platform you use in your schools, but we chose to use Google Classroom, and that kept us all on the same timeline. And Google Classroom now offers an originality report, which we used, and then we used their embedded rubrics for common grading, and that worked really well to share those collaborative comments. So on this slide that you're looking at, you will notice that there is an overview of some different resources to get you started. And I am going to pass the wand to Chris Franks, our video arts and video production instructor.
All right, thank you, Lori.
Yep.
As Lori mentioned, my name is Chris Franks. I am the visual art teacher here at Highland High School. I also teach video production. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about storyboards and what they are and how I use them in my classes. First, you need to know I spent my first probably 11, 12 years teaching as solely a visual art teacher, focusing on the K through 8 grade bands in our district. And things changed and teacher roles were rearranged. And I then spent the last 8 years teaching gifted and video production. And before taking this position as a high school art teacher this year. And taking the gifted role was a bit daunting, but it introduced me to storyboards, and I kind of fell in love with them. I have a couple links here that I hope you have the opportunity to go to in the future, but included them because, well, first of all, I'm a very visual learner. I like to see illustrations and pictures and videos and sketches to show me what I'm learning about. Even in lectures that I've sat in with, I tend to doodle. You may have students who do this too, and I just want you to be aware that it's not always a bad thing. Visual learners like to do stuff like that. Teaching art as a visual learner was and is very natural, but when switching to gifted, I had some apprehensions. I was going to be writing more with students and reading more, and I felt a bit overwhelmed at this time in my career. Also at this time, I was team teaching a video production class, and this actually helped me with my new role as a gifted teacher. And see, as an artist, I sketch practice pictures all the time before I start to actually create the final artwork I'm working on. It's how I think through the problems involved in my project. And when writing, we tend to use rough drafts, but in artworks, we sketch. Now I had to deal with video, moving pictures, and telling stories with the video. The teacher I was working with showed me some information on storyboarding as a way to rough draft my videos and work out the problems that I encounter on paper in just a series of sketches. I can also start to think about composition and background and all the fun stuff artists like to get involved with. I found when I started to employ these in my gifted classes, just initially with fiction stories that students wrote, they liked them. We started to expand on them with like mini comics or characters. And finally, we started creating stop motion films. And they would write a story, then create a storyboard to help them set up their filming. And it just was amazing to see these gifted students and what they would create and how they'd work through their problems on paper before starting to create characters and film them. On this first slide, I have a template there of just a basic storyboard that I use, and templates are easy to find. I actually draw them out myself, but students like that more polished look. I also included an app on here, or a link to a stop motion app. It's something that we use with Chromebooks initially before I start taking them into some of the higher end programs with Adobe Premiere Pro. I also included a video of just a scene from Star Wars that plays the video, and then it has like a run of storyboard images above it. Laura, if you could move to the next slide, thanks. Here's just some examples that I tend to show students. You see some popular films here, the Star Wars films. That middle one might be a little bit small, but it's the scene in Lord of the Rings. And then the final one is a storyboard from Finding Nemo. And as you can see, they include titles. If you look at the Nemo storyboard and the Lord of the Rings storyboard, if you look closely, you'll see little notes down by the images. And this allows just a little bit of information. Especially, this works really well when students are working in teams. And they're able to communicate, put notes there. That way one of them can film while the other one's like creating something, or they can film multiple scenes at the same time. That's a beauty of video, is when they start working a little bit three-dimensionally is what I call it. Like they look at a film and they think it's put together from scene one through the end, and when they learn that they can actually film the end scene before the beginning scene, that's sort of an eye-opener to them and how they rearrange it. I go over what a storyboard is, and it's basically just a visual representation of a film sequence, and it breaks down the action into individual panels. It's a series of ordered drawings, and you can get really involved. You can put camera direction, dialogue, or other little details. The couple video links that I shared in the previous slide, they really go into it and how directors like Steven Spielberg use it, and they basically sketch out their whole movie before they start filming. These can be comprised of drawings and sketches, or they can be images or photographs that the students can take or find off the internet. Again, I use them in all my classes, really. Like, we do a little bit of stop motion in art. I do have the Adobe software in my art room as well as my video production room. I like to use it to kind of see a rough draft of students' videos. Anytime they're creating a artwork or a film that is multiple images, I like to employ it, and it allows them to start to think about their shots. Being an artist, the elements of art are important. I want them to pay attention to their composition, lighting, background, all the different angles in a film to set up pleasing to the eye shots. It allows them to develop a plan. Like I said, if they're working in partners, it really works well. It also gives them a map for assembling their projects, especially if they're filming their scenes out of order, and they can go back to their storyboard and kind of edit everything back together, and they have the instruction booklet. And one of the things that I most like about storyboards and assigning it to students is it allows me to see their idea, and then I can provide more help and guidance to them before they really spend a lot of time videoing. And students hate it when they go out and video, and then they come back and do all the importing of the video into the computer, and then we tell them, well, that's not a very good shot. Like why did you decide to shoot in the sun, or why is their head at the bottom middle of the picture as opposed to a lower third? And so I can kind of help them set up their shots that way. I like to use storyboards to teach too. Not all teachers, I imagine, would jump at that because maybe they lack the artistic background, but I like to use it. Again, in the video class, it helps me to point out in terms of like when we're putting together an intro piece at the beginning, I can show them what we want to do to assemble the project, what kind of shots we're looking for, and then they have that map up there on the board. And like I said, it's a great tool for visual learners, but also visual teachers. Thinking about how to incorporate storyboards into other subject areas, I feel like some teachers already do it and may not even call it storyboarding, but they can interpret a novel through storyboarding. When you read, I know when I read, tend to imagine what characters look like and how scenes play out in your mind. If you have students, instead of always writing about that, but maybe creating a little storyboard of that, it'll show how well they understand a scene and what's happening. You can storyboard songs or poems very easy, or reimagine a play or a dance. I think of choreography. You can put that together in a storyboard sequence very easy. You can add it to a rough draft plan as part of a video project. I've heard of lots of other classes using video in terms of their either a historical project or just a movie that they're doing in like English class. They tend to write it out, but if you add a storyboard aspect to it, that might be more interesting to some of the students who don't like to write as much. You could create storyboards on how to solve problems in math. You can show the life cycle of a species or a chemical change. It's really just a series of pictures and notes. And any student who you see doodles a lot, sketches, tends to be very creative, can benefit from the incorporation of storyboards as even just a differentiation piece. Lori, if you switch to my last slide. The last thing that I want you to see is a lot of students will be a little bit intimidated initially by storyboard. Oh, I can't draw. How am I going to put this together? It really can be very simple. This is a very older project that a student that's graduated probably 5 or 6 years ago put together. It's just a simple stop motion on a whiteboard, and she kind of storyboarded out her idea to share it with me and say, hey, this is what we're going to do, Mr. Franks. This is how I'm going to put it together. And it's just basically stick figures. And if you look at some professional filmmakers, their storyboards might start out very crude, and then they give it to those high-end artists to make them nice. But I like to show my students like those simple storyboards so that they're not intimidated by fearing that they're not going to be able to draw well enough. All right, that's really all I have. I'm going to pass it over to Chad Hostetler now.
Thank you, Chris. Well, as mentioned, I'm Chad Hostetler, and I'm the history teacher here at Highland High School. I've been asked just to simply sort of show some examples of video storytelling that I do in my class. You'll see 2 of them there on the slide that you'll get after this presentation. But before I get into those examples, I just wanted to briefly just provide some background as to why I like video storytelling and why I buy into it. I teach the freshmen and sophomores. I have all the freshmen and sophomores mostly here at Highland, and when they come to me as freshmen, several of them, many of them, have a negative perception towards history, and some of those students have bought into the narrative that history is nothing more than memorization of people, dates, facts taken out of context. And what does that translate to them? How does that translate to them in their minds? Well, history's boring, and that's what I want to change. I want to change that narrative that that history really is fascinating, and that change the narrative to learning the story of history, and that history is a grand story, and it's a grand story of humanity in all of its goodness and its vileness, and that they themselves are also participants in this story of history. And one of the ways I like to utilize storytelling in my class is through video production or through video storytelling. I think there's just a lot of values in it, from creativity and engagement, and fun, a fun way to engage the standards, the content standards. But there's also 21st century skills here that are valuable: communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. But then what do I actually do? Again, two of them are going to be linked here on these slides. I really don't feel, if I'm being honest, I don't feel like I use a lot of flash or pizzazz when it comes to trendy types of tech or trendy tools for video production. I really feel I keep it basic. The students know, they've grown up in this culture of technology, and I think they know how to sort of video produce and edit and whatnot. I feel it's my job to just provide opportunities for the students and opportunities for them to be successful in telling a historical story, and to a certain degree, again, to be a part of this historical story. So just want to highlight two of the ones that I do. They're both World War II based. One is a freshman project, one is a sophomore. I'm trying to see which one you have there, Lori. I think the one on the left is the freshman one. I do some very basic storytelling where I have students, like for example here recently, be a World War I soldier on the Western Front, and I give them different pieces that they need to research and tell me about in their story. But they a lot of students take off with that. Not all of them, but there's students who love getting creative with these projects. One kid I know was with his Nerf gun down in some pseudo trench, telling me all about his experience in World War I. But I digress there. Again, what Lori had pulled up there was a freshman project I do with World War II. It's actually they create a music video. Again, this and the sophomore project, which is the one that will see on the. Actually, I told you the wrong one. This is the sophomore project right here that she has pulled up. I try to give them guidance and encourage them and push them with the content, but a lot of times they just simply take off with it. And when you pull these projects up, you'll see the content that they need to research. And again, that's some of the parts that I help them with. But then I also just give them just some parameters and some guidance in it. I think I give them a little bit more of the guidance in the freshman one, since they're new for me with the song project. But I'd be very willing to talk about any of these if anyone wants to email me or just reach out to me. Again, online. I'd love to talk about these. I think it's engaging and a fun way for the students to wrap their brains in their hands here in history. With that, I'll pass it on to Carrie Jones, who is our English language arts teacher here at Highland. Take it away, Carrie.
All right, thanks, Chad. It is a pleasure to get to work with those three individuals from our high school. I feel very fortunate. I do teach high school, sophomore, and senior English. And I just wanted to share one of the projects that my seniors do early on in the year. We have a unit talking about forging a hero, and we talk about the hero's journey. And we trace that by originally reading Beowulf, which is an epic hero story from thousands of years ago. From there, we jump into literary heroes, and then from there, we get into the ones that they really know about, which is superheroes that are on your Marvel movies or DC flicks. And from that, we start to talk about what does that have to do with us? You know, why is that relevant? And can we find modern everyday heroes? So Lori, if you'll click on the blue Epic Digital Storytelling slideshow there, I've went ahead and kind of given you the basics that I use to present this project to my kids. I really want to focus on why are we still telling stories of Beowulf from thousands of years ago? What's in it that is lasting? And we kind of interview or realize the fact that storytelling's in our blood. And so after I go through steps 1 of reading about epic heroes and then maybe watching parts of 1, we really break it down to locally. Who are our local heroes? And we get in the newspaper and we kind of look at some of the just everyday people that are doing courageous things. And then we go one step further, which would be step 4, and we find, you know, someone in our own lives that's doing something that is memorable. And the best platform I've found for this is using one that's already done for you. It's super easy. It's called StoryCorps. Many of you might be familiar with it. But initially, I mean, what it does is it makes your story last digitally in the Library of Congress essentially forever. And the kids really latch onto that. They like the fact to think that their story or their loved one's story will be there for other people to see in our future. So if you want to click on the next slide, Lori, it talks about, you know, everyday heroes in our own lives. And they pick a person, they interview them using the StoryCorps Connect or the app. Go ahead and go to the next slide. There's a couple of examples that I've put on the slide. One is the one on your left is Toby, and he would be an 11-year-old boy that interviewed his grandmother during COVID using Zoom techniques and meetings. StoryCorps has a very outlined approach to this, and it's very, very easy to do. The other one is a doctor that is isolated from his wife and kids as he's running COVID testing, and that's his kind of story about how that's going for him too. But those will forever be out there, just like the epic hero story of Beowulf. If you want to go to the next slide, it'll show that there are other examples in StoryCorps that you can see. Some of them are animated. I love those ones. The kids love those ones. Some are actual footage that you can see the video images as well. And now that COVID had hit, StoryCorps made it even easier to use their app. And you get the visual storytelling of the people and not just their voice as well. So during COVID, if you want to go to the next slide, we weren't sure like how to, you know, reach out to people. And this is a good way to do that. During Thanksgiving, when they weren't able to see some of their family, they were able to do this connection of a memorable story. The link takes you right to StoryCorps and gives you easy instructions. They are in a teacher toolkit, step by step for the kids to do. They actually even give the kids good starting questions to ask in the interview, which I think is wonderful because, as a lot of you have stated, kids sometimes are intimidated by things and don't know where to start. This really just hands it to them and it's just get to the story and see what comes out of it. You can go to the next slide, Lori. I really love this unit. The kids get excited about talking to people in their family and just in their community, and the stories that come out of it, they share with each other. And I think your kids can do it too, rural or urban kids from all around the United States, and it's hopefully getting around the world. Off of the StoryCorps site, it says 85% of people that listen to these stories feel more positive about society as a result of that. So I think that's worth something. That definitely shows us that storytelling is something that we need as humans to connect. And the more we can make that connection, the better our lives are going to be. Back to you, Lori.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. The last few slides, let me jump up there. Okay, the last few slides that you'll see are resources. We have shared resources from Ohio Model Curricula as well as InfOhio. There's also all the standards are linked again on a single slide. And then POV has done an outstanding job of putting together some classroom resources, some lesson plans, discussion guides. on a variety of the POV projects. So we encourage you to visit these links as well as explore their website for a whole new portal of teacher support materials.